Hey y'all, this is Amanda and welcome back to my Texas Zone 8A garden, and today we're out on the front porch and we're going to be discussing my 5 favorite pink perennials that love full hot sun. Okay, so if you've been following my channel for a while, you've probably seen that I have been investing more in perennials and shrubs throughout my garden. In the past, I've done a lot of annuals, and it's just that I'm trying to build color over time. And if you have a garden of all perennials, you can have bursts of color throughout time, but you don't have a lot of solid color. And I love color. But I have been working really hard to add more perennials mixed throughout my garden. And since pink is one of my favorite colors and I love to include it throughout my garden, I thought today we would go over my 5 favorite pink perennials, but specifically pink perennials that love full sun. Now, when I say full sun, I mean full sun. I am in Zone 8A in Texas, and we get a lot of hot summer sun. And during the summer, we definitely usually get at least 30 plus days of 100-degree weather. Last summer, we went 60 days without rain. So I'm talking about perennials that do well with this hot, long extended weather. So let's start with number 1, coneflowers. So coneflowers are more of a recent discovery for me, which I know sounds silly. They've been around for a very long time, but I've been adding more and more of them to my garden. I love how tried and true they are throughout the summer. They don't seem to be bothered by the heat at all, and that's one of my favorite things about them. Coneflowers are also known as echinacea. They tend to bloom summer to fall. They come in a wide variety of colors from green, white, yellow, red, orange, purple, and pink. They tend to be hardy in zones 3 to 9, and one of the great things about them is they are deer resistant. Not deer proof, but deer resistant. I don't have deer in my area, but a lot of my subscribers have and deal with deer, and so I try to point that out when I can. Now, coneflowers are big attractors for butterflies, bees, and all types of pollinators. They do have some medicinal properties and can be utilized in herbal tea. I don't do that, so make sure you do your research before you utilize them. Coneflowers need full sun. That's minimum 6 to 8 hours a day. They are pretty drought tolerant, but they do need to be watered regularly when they're being established. They do self-seed a little bit. They're not very aggressive and big spreaders, but they will self-seed. When they self-seed, it's very easy to dig up wherever this new seedling comes up and move it somewhere else in your garden. If they're native to your area, they don't need a lot of fertilizer. I don't tend to fertilize mine. I just put a slow release when I first plant them, and then they're fine after that. They do benefit from deadheading. Deadheading will prolong the blooming cycle for you, but if you decide to leave your flowers on there, the seeds are really beneficial to birds in your area. Coneflowers are one of my new favorites, and I will be adding more as the season goes on. Number 2 on my list is Dianthus. Now, Dianthus are also known as pinks and sometimes carnations. They grow in a wide variety of heights. So you can get low growing on the ground, almost like a ground cover, and then you can get taller ones known as carnations that can be utilized as cut flowers. Dianthus are rebloomers for me, meaning once they give me a flush of blooms, I can cut them back and they'll give me an additional flush of blooms. They come in a wide variety of colors, anywhere from like fuchsia, pinks, whites, corals, purples, all in that particular type of range. I actually grow multiple varieties of Dianthus within my garden, and I've grown multiple varieties throughout the year. I even have them in peaches. Now, their nickname is called pinks, and it's not because of the color, it's because of pinking shears. If you have ever seen the pinking shears, which are kind of jagged edge scissors, and that's what the edges of the flowers' petals look like. That's why they're known as pinks. Dianthus love full sun. They need well-draining soil. They don't like to be overly watered, so they're really great and drought tolerant. They tend to bloom in spring to summer, and they're hardy in zones 4 to 9. They do benefit from deadheading, so once the bloom has kind of lived its life cycle, feel free to cut it back and you might get additional flushes throughout the season. They can self-seed. That's not been something that I have struggled with in my particular zone, but that might be something that they do in other zones. They do like to be fertilized, so make sure you have them on a regular fertilizing schedule. I don't, I'm terrible about regular fertilizing schedules, so I just do it when I remember, and mine are very prolific. They also, their foliage tends to be evergreen throughout the winter season. These are a great plant whether you're utilizing them for ground cover or whether you're growing them for cut flowers. They are absolutely wonderful. They are one of my favorites, and I love utilizing them in my front yard because they're such a big, beautiful burst of color. Number 3 on my list is Salvia. Now, Salvia is something that I'm trying to put more of in my garden because I feel like they do really well throughout the spring, summer, and fall seasons. They tend to be very drought tolerant and they stand up to the heat beautifully. Most of my garden has salvia that's in purples and whites, but I do have some in pinks, and pink is an area that I'm wanting to invest more in for my salvia. Salvia love the full hot sun, minimum 6 to 8 hours a day, and they are hardy in zones 5 to 10. Salvias are loved by pollinators. I'm sitting on the front garden right now and I'm just looking out here, and the salvia has tons of pollinators blooming around it. Actually, everything's going crazy out here right now. There's bees everywhere. Everybody's having a really good time out here in the front garden. Salvia, also known as sage, is something that a lot of people are just kind of consider it pretty foolproof in your garden. Salvia do benefit from being deadheaded, so you can allow it to bloom, cut it back, and it should give you another flush throughout the seasons. That also tends to be deer resistant and rabbit resistant as well. Now, salvias can grow anywhere from like 18 inches all the way up to like 5 feet. So make sure when you're choosing a variety at your local nursery that you're looking at how tall its potential mature plant is going to be so that you can place it in an appropriate place in your garden. Now, salvia don't really need to be fertilized once they've been planted. You can fertilize at the very beginning of the season once and they'll be fine with that. I like to just toss down a slow release fertilizer and that works great. One of the things I've noticed about salvia over the years is that if you don't prune them, they'll really develop very woody stems. So I do prefer to prune mine at least once through the season, once I've had one flush of blooms, and then I like to prune them at the end of the season so that I don't develop just really hard woody stems that aren't actually super attractive. When you cut back or you prune the salvia, it will produce new growth from its base plant. One of the great things about salvia is that you can also divide it every few years. You just dig it up in the fall and divide the plant in half, and then you have 2 plants. I suggest doing that every 3 to 5 years. Salvia is such a great thing to have in your garden. Like I said, it's one of those foolproof plants, and it's one of the things that I haven't really paid all that much attention to because it's so common, but now I feel silly that I haven't done more of it in my garden. So I will be incorporating more pink salvia throughout my garden. Number 4 on my list is Phlox. Now, Phlox actually does well in full sun, and part shade. It does well in a wide variety of areas. I grow mine in mostly full sun. Phlox blooms spring to summer. I find that mine blooms mostly in the spring and only a little bit into the summer. Once the hot weather hits, it definitely dies back and it is not interested in producing any more blooms at that time. It is hardy in zones 2 to 9, and it's a big pollinator attractor. Phlox comes in a wide variety of medium to tall varieties. Some varieties can be, up to 4 to 5 feet, and then the shorter varieties are anywhere from like 12 to 18 inches. There's also some varieties such as creeping phlox that actually kind of grow and are more of a ground cover than anything else. They do need to be watered regularly, so they aren't as drought tolerant as a lot of other varieties of plants, and they also benefit from being pruned throughout the season. So once your flowers come through and they're dying back, go ahead and cut them in hopes of a new flush of blooms. Now, some varieties of phlox are not very heat tolerant, so make sure that you're buying a phlox that's appropriate for your particular zone. Chat with your local nursery or do research on it before you invest the money within it. I love utilizing phlox for garden arrangements or for my fresh floral designs. I think they're beautiful. They definitely have a whimsical quality to the plant that I really think looks like Alice in Wonderland or Secret Garden type styling. I grow a lot of pink varieties, but it does come in a lot of other varieties, including whites, reds, corals, peaches. Lots of varieties in that color family. One of the things I wish Phlox bloomed longer. I find that mine flush, and even if I cut them back, I only get a small flush after that. And so they really only flush for me about 6 weeks. I wish it was longer throughout the summer season, but you get what you get. And finally, last on my list is Lantana. Now, Lantana is only perennial in zones about my zone 8A, sometimes all the way to zone 11. They are more of a tropical plant. In other zones, you can plant them as an annual, and they are beautiful and prolific, and they are worth planting as an annual, just so you know. Lantana is the plant that looks the most beautiful and produces the most color in the hottest, worst weather of each season. Lantana does tend to come back for me every year. Some years it might not come back, and that's fine. It depends on if we have a really cold winter or not. Lantana is available in a wide variety of colors, anything from just a subtle, beautiful white to multi, bicolor blooms, which are absolutely beautiful. So you can utilize them in a more subtle, refined garden with their softer tones, or they can be a riot of color for you in the hottest parts of the summer. They absolutely need full sun, lots of sun. The more sun, the better. And they are big for pollinators. They do tend to be deer resistant as well. I always say resistant because there's not really many plants that are actually deer proof. Now, Lantana can be evergreen. In my particular area, they are not. They die back all the way to the ground, and I cut them back, and then they come back from the base plant every season. And if you want a plant that thrives on the neglect, Lantana is the plant for you. They are extremely drought tolerant. They don't need a lot of fertilizer. They don't want to be messed with. They basically just want to be ignored and allowed to flower like crazy. Now, Lantana are designated as invasive in a few states in our area, as they can grow quite vigorously. So make sure you check that out before you're planting in your garden. Lantana are also poisonous, and so make sure that you're planting them away from children, small animals, things along those lines. And truthfully, that's to be said with every single plant. You are taking a risk every time you plant something in your garden. So make sure that you are being aware if you do have small children or if you do have animals, pets that might be interacting with that particular plant. Lantana are not picky about their soil. You can put them in the junkiest, crappiest soil and they'll do beautifully. I actually think they prefer cruddier soil. And then Lantana do respond really well to pruning. So once you get a flush of flowers, if they start to die back or if the flowers start to turn to berries, go ahead and give it a nice pruning by about 25%, and you should get another flush of blooms. Most Lantanas kind of grow shorter, maybe 3 feet and below, but there are some varieties that'll grow up to 6 feet tall. I don't have any experience with those particular varieties, but that is something to be aware of when you're shopping and looking to put Lantana within your garden. And Lantana also with the pruning, that can help shape your Lantana. I let my Lantana just go wild, and it will send out, shoots, kind of random stuff. You can, if you want a little more tidy of a habit, you can prune it into a shape and it will rebloom within that shape. So keep that in mind. While I prefer the wild look, you can have a much more trim look within your garden. All right, I wanted to end this with saying all 5 of these perennials that I've talked about, I've grown multiple varieties and for multiple years within my garden. I don't find them to have, to be overly affected by any particular disease or pest. I do have occasional spider mites pop up or aphids, but nothing where they're just, covered with them as season after season. All of these, the biggest thing, and as I'm dripping sweat, is they do really, really well in the summer heat. And that is something that we are going into right now in the Texas area. We've already hit 90 degrees. And truthfully, by the end of May into June, I'm sure we'll be having our first 100-degree weather day coming up. Not looking forward to it, but it is what it is. All right, you all, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If I missed a beautiful pink perennial that loves full sun that you think we all need to know about, please drop that below and share that information with us. As always, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you know when my latest videos are up, and make sure you check me out on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. As always, she's a mad gardener or decorator or anything else that she wants to be. Thanks, y'all.